American veterans, servicemen and women, friends and officials, good morning. Thank you, Kevin, for that kind introduction. We're here today because our veterans sacrificed to build something on our nation's God-given blessings. In 1918, World War I ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. It was the end of the war to end all wars, and Americans recognized the lives and personal sacrifices given to preserve freedom against tyranny in Europe at that specific time. Today, as imperfect humans, we remain a country resolved to do the very best we can to love our fellow man. But in this imperfect state, we must reckon with the inability to love perfectly, resulting in painful wars and conflicts. Even now, we grapple with a human imperfection in knowing that one of our own in uniform has turned on our own troops at Fort Hood. I cannot explain it and join you in mourning the passing of some of our very best brothers and sisters in arms. And while the urge is strong to look to those who look most like the gunman and to assign blame, I have to recall the story my mother told me about my grandparents' neighbors in 1941, and I pray for an outcome we would all want for the problems we face today. Some of you know that my mom is Hawaiian. It so happens my grandfather, Lawrence K. Keolanui, was a ship worker at Pearl Harbor, and they lived above the harbor in Pearl City. And yes, they witnessed that December 7th Sunday morning attack on sailors, soldiers, Marines, airmen, civilians, and our fleet. As the Zeros and bombers pounded our harbor, my grandparents' next door neighbor came out in her front yard and lay face down and wept in shame. Her name was Kuroda, from a first-generation Japanese immigrant family. Our nation's reaction was strong against Japanese Americans, and we still wonder how to reconcile with the perceived threats and fear of the unknown. A year ago last summer, my wife Elaine, our sons, and I joined my mom and dad in a visit to the islands. We stayed in an Army lodge, and across the street was a military parade ground named Kuroda Field, named for Robert Kuroda, one of Mrs. Kuroda's 5 sons, each killed in combat service to the United States in the 442nd Infantry Regiment in Italy. Robert was awarded the Medal of Honor. I pray we effectively honor those lost at Fort Hood and bring justice to those families. I pray we effectively separate the terrorist criminals from the people who love this country. It will not be an easy problem to solve and will require our utmost in resolve. But today, while our nation is no exception to the wars of the world, we must acknowledge an exceptional people like Robert Kuroda, and those are our Campbell County veterans today. Born of a necessity for freedom, tempered in battle from Yorktown and Chickamauga to Pearl Harbor, Omaha Beach and Guadalcanal to LZ X-Ray and Quezon to the Euphrates River and Mogadishu, our veterans took action in the face of fear and clear threat of death, and by their actions they have ensured a way of life, one that we love. They ensure it today in Baghdad, in the Hindu Kush Mountains, and desert plains of Kandahar, Afghanistan. Their sacrifices create a debt that cannot be repaid, and they know it and do it gladly still. We cannot understand every nuance of these sacrifices, but we clearly understand today to the extent that we offer our most heartfelt thank you to these valorous men and women. My soldier story began in this courthouse in 1983 when I enlisted in the 1176 Petroleum Supply Company, Jacksboro, Tennessee, Tennessee Army National Guard. Like some of you, I followed my father into service. But on that day, my dad, Robert Morton, became my platoon sergeant. And now my name was Private Morton on top of being his boy. So I requested a transfer to Clinton. Truthfully, my dad is the best soldier, Marine, commissioned, warrant, and non-commissioned officer I ever knew. Yep, he's held all those titles and served them all well. And then there's my father-in-law, Estel Jones, who inspired me as I learned of his contributions fighting the 13th U.S. Army Air Force from island to island throughout the Philippines in 1943 and 1944. I've heard firsthand local accounts from those who defended fire bases in Vietnam overrun by Viet Cong and stood and won the fight to get them back. If you had time to listen to the morning's broadcast today, you heard many more stories of local heroes among us. These examples are precisely the reason I knew I wanted to serve my small part in this great experiment we call America. I even worked for a general named Steiner one time in a paratrooper outfit. And let me assure you, the standards were high, and he had us war ready when we deployed to Desert Shield and Desert Storm. My wife Elaine and I have worked together on a 21-year course through long separations, combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, 14 households, and 3 wonderful sons. Through it all, we've been blessed to know the most wonderful people, veterans, their families and friends. I salute you today, our veterans, our crack honor guard, and veteran services team. I'm going to leave you with an article, a bit lengthy, but it's about a veteran that will make you very proud. For those of you who are non-golfers, David Feherty is an irreverent TV golf analyst. An Irishman and former tour professional, he has a whimsical and often sarcastic view of the world and of professional golf. This article is particularly good. I don't know where we get these kids, but God bless them, and thank God they're on our side, so enjoy it. Soldiering On, the Troops First Foundation gives America's injured vets a chance to reclaim their dignity, by David Feherty, Golf Magazine, August 26, 2009. The final round of Tiger Woods' AT&T National in July was particularly satisfying for me to witness because I followed the Tiger toward his one-shot victory over Hunter Mahon, who had earlier posted an incredible 62. Hunter had supported my Troops First, or F-Troop Foundation, events since the beginning, and like Tiger, his dad served in the military. Earlier that week, PGA pros like Tom Watson played with 30 or so seriously injured servicemen and women, most of them amputees, in my second annual Improvised Explosive Day of Golf tournament. This year, I had another amazing group of warriors, from Rob Brown, a below-the-knee amputee who may represent the U.S. in both the regular Olympics in kayak and Paralympics in track and field. And then there was a 22-year-old PFC Brendan Morocco of the 25th Infantry Division, who on Easter Sunday in Tikrit was robbed of all 4 limbs plus his left eye. It takes a while to figure out how to react to the severely injured warriors, but after almost 3 years of being around them, I think I've figured it out. This year was the first time I'd met Brendan, with whom it's impossible to shake hands, play footsie, chest bump, or for that matter, pull his finger. A stump to knuckles thing had to suffice, and after that I embarked on what is now my normal procedure for getting to know a new member of my F-Troop, who was being driven around in a cart by his brother Mike. It went something like this. "You know, you're not as tall as I thought you'd be." Brendan retorted, "I used to be taller." "Yes, I can imagine. So what would you like to do today?" Brendan said, "I'd like to kick your blankety blank blank." Well, I retorted, "Well, that seems unlikely. Obviously, you can't walk, but you look like you bounce pretty well. Are you okay to be in a cart today without a seatbelt?" Brendan retorted, "Yeah, I can hold on with my butt cheeks." I said, "Well, excellent. Clench on, brother. I'll see you out there." Later that morning, I saw him and said, "Hey, Stumpy, how's it going?" Brendan said, "I like this. Is there any chance I can go watch Tiger with you this week?" I said, "I'll get you inside the ropes if I have to wear you like a floppy hat." Brendan said, "Man, that's cold." He said, "Hey, get used to it, kid. You're an F-Trooper now." These exchanges usually horrify first-time witnesses, but after a few moments, everyone gets it. Brendan had lost his limbs, not his mind, but more important for a man who's been trained to be one of the best soldiers on the planet, he had lost his dignity. By his reactions to my seemingly callous assaults on what was left of him, Brendan regains a little of that dignity each time. Brendan, like the rest of the F-Troop men and women, is more courageous, more inspiring, more complete, and funnier than any able-bodied person I know. His intelligence and his sense of humor are the only weapons he has left to defend himself, and he will use them in a manner that leaves those of us who are lucky enough to have him and others like him defending our freedom utterly awestruck and humbled. Tiger had a one-shot lead after the 17th hole, and he stood waiting for Anthony Kim to putt out. As he stood, I put my hand on his shoulder and told him that Brendan, who had followed him all day in a cart inside the ropes, was now in his wheelchair where Tiger would make the turn and corner to go to the 18th tee. Tiger smiled at me and nodded. Before heading to the last tee, Tiger hunkered down and knuckle stumped one of his heroes, PFC Brendan Morocco. Brendan, who before that day had been ashamed and frightened to go out in public, was wheeled by his father Alex and his brother Mike down the center of the 18th fairway to an overwhelming, roaring, standing ovation. He lifted what is left of one of his arms in a salute, and this announcer wept as Tiger looked on in the background smiling. It's hard to know which boy the old Green Beret Earl Woods would have been more proud of at that moment, but I do know this. Because of Tiger Woods, Hunter Mahon, and the Troops First Foundation, and Campbell County because of efforts like this today and the ones that you carry out in our daily lives, they have dignity. PFC Brendan Morocco is no longer ashamed to go out in public, and by this winter he will be hunting birds with us and pulling his own trigger, or I'll make the little swine drop and give me 20. Only a fool would bet against him being able to do both. Like they say, there's strong, and then there's Army strong. May God bless all of you and have a blessed Veterans Day.
Thank you, Colonel Morton.